Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey. I have to ask, Eric, did you see the ad? The ad that the Universal Orlando Resort put out? In like the last 48 hours?
Yeah, no, I did see the ad. It started off a little different. It was like in a rainy car or something like that, and then it gets right to the playbook of all the families and stuff getting together. And I was on X, and everybody was pretty much evangelizing, like, this is the best ad created, and Universal really nailed it, and they're taking a playbook out of Disney, so to speak. And what did you think of the ad? I mean, it was about 30 seconds long, or so, right?
I want to say there's a longer version out there, maybe a 60, but it does. I think it does a masterful job of doing the Disney thing, emotionally tying you into vacationing at Universal, and that's kind of the interesting thing. Face it, Universal Orlando at this point opened June of 1990, so we are 36 years, or soon to be 36 years in. And I think they've earned a seat at the nostalgia table. Whereas when you and I were pre-gaming, you and Lauren don't entirely feel that way, do you?
Well, I believe they do a good job with nostalgia now. I think that's one reason why I'm leaning into it so much, because I'm the one with the freaking pink and blue jacket, wearing it around. I love nostalgia. So, like, I'm a 90s kid, so I'm all for it. But I feel like there's still something slightly different about the Disney ones that kind of looped me in probably 2014 and 16 and 18. Those videos that were almost like the planning videos and the wonderful magical shots. I feel like Universal's trying it, but I still think they're just slightly off. But I do believe I am in the small minority there, because everybody I saw was just like, they nailed it and hit it out of the park. Where I beg to say that I watched the newest Mardi Gras one that they put together, and it's a short one, and I like that a little bit more. I'm like, they get it. That's a party. And it was a little less about families, and it was more, you saw people with friends, and you saw people eating, and it seemed more of like a party vibe, which I think Universal has that. It feels like if I'm going to take a group of friends and have a good time, I think Universal is probably a good place to go. Where if I want to have my child and we're going to do, rides together, I could still see where Disney holds that. And I think from their marketing approach, I can see where they're leaning into that, and I can see where they're going to win or compete. But this one I thought I was slightly off, but I think I'm in the minority.
No. You're allowed to have a different opinion. So there are two classic. If you want to watch Disney at the height of emotional manipulation, there's a DVC ad where literally it's a grandfather on a bench with a grandchild, where, just the whole appeal is, well, you want to take your grandchild to Disney World. And I mean, it's a masterful ad. But there's one that I would argue that is even better, but it was done for Tokyo Disneyland, and it's anime.
Oh, really?
And what's great about it is it starts off as a little girl in front of Cinderella Castle, and again, done in anime, coming up to Mickey Mouse, and then you literally go through the next 25 years of her life, where, she goes to Tokyo Disneyland with her friends, and you see her become a teenage girl, and you see her bump into her future husband, and then you see the full circle. She's there with her daughter, and puts her daughter down to have the same greeting with Mickey Mouse. And it's just sort of like, I haven't even been to this park, and I'm weeping.
And I still think they get that. That's the one thing is like, and I think Universal can lay into that. They definitely have people that, at this point in time went as kids, and now they're taking their kids. So they can lean into stuff like that, so it'd be interesting. But, this is the theme parks. It's all about making the memories, whether it's with friends or it's with families and so forth. And we know we have a good friends that can help make that happen for everyone. Right, Jim?
Smooth, very smooth. Okay, and of course, Eric is talking about our friends at Be Our Guest Vacation. And are you planning your next adventure? Let the experts at Be Our Guest Vacation take care of the details. As a platinum level earmarked travel agency. They provide top-tier concierge service for trips to Universal Orlando, Universal Hollywood, Disney Parks, cruises, and more. So get started today at beourguestvacations.com, and be sure to mention that the Epic Universal podcast was the one that sent you. And if you're going there next year as opposed to this year, Orlando, Universal, you might get to experience a brand new ride, right? Which just got finally confirmed today.
Yeah, Jim, we're recording on the 20th, and I sent you a message early this morning. I said, Jim, I got to wait to send you the news portion because I got to wait for them to make this announcement because I think it was maybe the 18th or so. It was earlier this week. Universal, the official Twitter account, and I'm sure all their channels had just a 01.20.26 and basically a graphic of a speedometer and the odometer reaching those numbers, and it stops, and it was about maybe 80 some miles per hour before it stopped, and it made the loud rev engine racing sound, and everybody was speculating and basically, hey, they're going to make an announcement today. And sure enough, maybe it was around 2:00 or so. Twitter and all the social channels all flooded with, of course, the Fast and the Furious attraction is announced to take the place of where Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit. Any surpriser there, Jim?
Well, let's be honest, because you and I wasted time on this podcast because they did a kind of a masterful bit of misdirection. I mean, all of those little posters that went up on the construction wall, and here's one that could be interpreted as what is it, Ghostbusters, and here's another one that could be Back to the Future, and they kept us talking.
Well, they kept us talking even on this when they got it stopped around the 88 miles per hour on the thing. So it was just like there was a couple of us that still had some all right, please be at an original attraction, be like an old classic. I think the retro fans wanted it, but I think if we were all betting, we knew what was happening, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing, that in fact, I want to say like a year and a half ago when we finally, heard about this going, I literally had a friend said, no, it's Fast and Furious, and then but then from there to begin to doubt, well, no, that they are doing more with Back to the Future. In fact, that's have you heard the stories coming out of the UK project that their coaster is supposed to be Back to the Future?
No, I mean, it gives you a reason. It gives us more reasons to go. I personally, so just a little information for those who haven't really followed. The Fast and the Furious Hollywood Drift, same name. It is not an exact clone. So, no. But it is the same ride mechanics and so forth. So it's the 360 spinning, so forth. But I am one that kind of likes the idea of, make different attractions for different parks, so it gives us reasons to go. But in a reality, there's not a lot of people that are necessarily saying East Coasters are going to go typically to Orlando, West Coasters are going to go over to Hollywood. So the fact is, you can have the same attraction on both and still have a wide audience and not really overlap. But in this case, it is the exact same thing. It's the type of ride, but there are some deviations. Did you hear about this 170-foot vertical spike that is going to be on this version as opposed to I had to look up what a vertical spike was, and I know the roller coaster enthusiasts are going to hate me for this, but I'm like, I just want to know what that is. Are you familiar with a nice vertical spike, Jim?
I am familiar. Am I a fan? No. I mean, all right. The notion of, and you stop here, and you slide backwards. Right. It's like, no. No.
Well, I'm with you there, Jim, because they have one on Hagrid's, right? They have a vertical spike at the very end, and you don't go up nearly as high, but I think they were saying it's 17 stories in the air. That's what the press release is saying. That's pretty high, Jim.
It is. Again, you're in, I can see my house from here, country at that point, but, but at the same time, you can understand why Universal might do this. I mean, think about it. You're going to have a full retail program that you're putting together for, Fast and Furious Supercharged out in Hollywood. You're going, which you can bring, all of that to the East Coast. And, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. And it'll be interesting to see from a media point of view, because remember, aren't we using, that building, the Fast and Furious building? Is that still the plan in Florida?
Well, I don't know if that's the plan. They did announce it's closing in 2027. So that was my saving grace of like, all right, well, we're going to get rid of, like, we're not having too much Fast and Furious. And I know, I believe, is it the 25th anniversary this year? I believe there's an anniversary. It's roughly around that. So we've had a lot of Fast and Furious. We've seen a lot of the movies. I don't know if they're making too many more, but they're betting in. But I'm like, you don't need 2 attractions. So they did announce they're going to close in 2027. But I wonder if that becomes a ride, if that is the loading station. It's very unique. And I mean, I am one that kind of would love to have a different attraction, but I don't know what that is. I mean, I haven't really looked at the overheads. Maybe this is something that I'm sure BioReconstruct will start highlighting and giving us overviews. And I'm sure Alicia Stella will get us some permits. We'll find out what's going on.
Okay. Well, but at least now we know.
Yep, we do.
And on the other hand, if we pivot back over to Epic Universe, we have Mystery Concrete. Is that our story coming out of this park this week?
Well, we've been talking a while about how there's going to be elements of a nighttime show. I think the Celestial Good Night was patented, and we saw some of those videos from the hotel room of like a dragon or some winged beast flying with projections and so forth. But now we actually see there's a little peninsula that's kind of in a water, almost like a pond or lake area in the Epic region, and there is a peninsula now with hard concrete and definitely some fireworks. We believe this is where they're going to be setting it off. So there's all types of
tubes. Okay. And that certainly is an ingenious way to prevent, when you're launching your fireworks, from setting the nearby brush on fire. If there is no nearby brush but a body of water,
right?
Okay, I can get behind that.
Well, I think we're getting closer and closer. So wonderful aerial photos from BioReconstruct, and there's a short video I think on his YouTube channel that you could actually, because I'm like, where is this? I know of the land of Epic, but I'd never really kind of looked around. And there definitely is this little lake area, and this is right off and perfect to shoot up fireworks. So I think it's coming sooner than later, the nighttime spectacular over at Epic, whenever they decide that they're going to pull the trigger on that.
And speaking of Epic Universe, we had kind of, I hope a one-of-a-kind event happened just recently.
This was one that I was like, this is a terrifying moment. This is what I do never want to happen. But real high winds on January 18th at the Stardust Racers. Basically, they were running a test. Thankfully, there was no one on the actual cars, but they could not crest. They could not go all the way up the hill, and it got stuck. And both cars got stuck, and I wasn't aware that was such a thing. Did you know high winds could stop the coaster from making it all the way over?
That's an interesting scenario. I mean, especially in hurricane country, but at the same time, when there's a hurricane bearing down on Orlando, you're not running the coasters.
Yeah.
So, and this was during that weather event earlier this week when it got so cold. I mean, our friend Angela was mentioning that, what was it, 42?
Ooh.
That's downright breezy for Central Florida. More to the point, I can't imagine the folks who work the citrus side of the street were happy about, that temperature. But I was unaware there was wind accompanying that, especially high wind.
Yeah, high wind. So that's kind of what happened here. And you'd see the next day or so, they basically had to get cranes and to get them back into place. But thankfully, when I first saw it, and a lot of the articles out there was like, hey, coaster stuck, so forth. I was looking to see how they evacuated people, because I like a coaster. I don't like heights. So my biggest fear is being stuck at the top of a coaster. And I'm like, I would be one of those like, nope, I'm not getting out of this thing. You're going to have to push this back into the way with me in it. But it was very interesting to see how this was, but there was no one harmed. And I'm glad they run those tests. So kind of from a safety perspective to know that if there's high winds, I think it'd be an interesting question to ask maybe Mr. Schul in a sense, is like, what kind of testing do they have for winds for stuff like this? But yeah, that was a big news story this week here in the Epic universe.
Okay, and now shifting to the judicial
Oh,
space.
gosh, yeah.
Yeah, we learned of a series of lawsuits. Mind you, these didn't happen all at once, folks. They've kind of accumulated, and we're going to go through them quick. So,
Yeah.
what did you find, Eric?
Well, at first I was online and I do my typical looking to see what's in the news. And it seems like people and some of the real prominent news outlets out there were all basically mentioned. The first one I saw was unfortunately, there was a woman had passed away on the Mummy just recently. And that's the most recent one. And there's a lawsuit that's kind of being filed there. But then I was like, man, I feel like I've been seeing a lot of lawsuits. So I combined them all just to see, like, hold on. Why is this a matter of? Is this more like a recency kind of thing where you see one lawsuit and then you think of more, and or are there just more lawsuits in general? So one of the lawsuits that recently happened. Did you hear about the autistic daughter of a family that at Epic, one of the, I think it was the 1UP games, she was kind of getting out of the closed quarters. She was having a bit of a panic or so forth to get out. And they gave the receipt or the scannable tag to the dad to check out. But then the security guards followed out and basically was like, no, you shoplifted this, big ordeal. Seems like it didn't need to be a thing, but just so happened that the lady also works for Morgan & Morgan. So that turns into a lawsuit real quick, right?
Look, I get from the retail side of the street, and you have your security people. Look, this was obviously an innocent misunderstanding that has now become a lawsuit, and I feel for the employee who misinterpreted it, or the Universal team member who misinterpreted the situation, and it's tough for the family as well, especially, it must have been terrifying for the autistic daughter, but
yeah, right, right. So it's just bad, not a great look there, and we obviously know that there have been several from Stardust racers, over the time. And then we recently had a separate incident that was a lawsuit filed late in 2025, which a security dog attacked a guest during the security interaction, which is unfortunate and just you don't hear that a lot.
You don't.
And then there was, essentially at this point in time, you had the one that the Mummy just kind of came out, which is unfortunate. And we don't have a lot of information on that.
No, we don't. I mean, but I do want to stress here, this was a 70-year-old woman who, the train pulls into the station, she's unresponsive, and, they take her, by ambulance to a nearby hospital, and she passes away there. I mean, this is what kind of makes me crazy about, in fact, you mentioned that, there have been a lot of stories lately about deaths at theme parks, but especially the Disney parks. And it's a little aggravating for me because whenever one of these deaths happen, I turn up inside search engines again. No, seriously, I want to say like 10 years ago, I was interviewed by a reporter at the New York Post who was asking about a suicide that had happened at the Contemporary Hotel. And I sadly shared the information that, well, look, this happens at the Contemporary a lot. Not like every day, but frequently enough that the hotel actually has a tent on wheels that they can assemble quickly and roll into place over whichever individual has jumped off the building most recently. It's just between the height of the building, the exposed balconies. It's kind of a favored hotel for those who want to go to Disney World and then end it. And I didn't realize when I did this interview that it would follow me around for the rest of my life. And, and particularly this summer when a lot of sites learned that, if I say another death at Disney World, I get a lot of traffic. And they always manage to link back to, to this article in the New York Post, and, Disney theme park expert Jim Hill explains that blah, blah, blah. And it's like, great. I'm now the theme park death guy.
No, well, Jim, you listen, you work with a guy here that does a good SEO. I can make that go away for you.
Okay.
I'll make someone else the Disney death guy in that case. But one thing that I was noticing, Jim, because I'm like, I just feel like there's been a lot. Now, granted, we know there's a lot of lawsuits against theme parks, and and I'm sure their insurance rates are pretty high for it. But I did look up online, and I was trying to find out, did this go up? So I did find it interesting. LawStreetMedia.com did a nice little article, and they referenced the docket alarm and analytics, and it does actually show a noticeable increase over the last 10 to 20 years, with honestly 2023 being the spike of most lawsuits against theme parks. So this is SeaWorld, this is Disney, this is Universal, all of those. But we're still pretty significant. I mean, if you look back in like 2020, 2010 and so forth, we're talking maybe 5, 6 noticeable ones now, but we're like in the 20 mark. And so it is interesting to see that, there are attorneys out there taking on cases, and there are people that maybe just because attendance is up, more people, more cases, but very interesting to see. And I hope we don't have to see these anymore. And for your search position, let's just hope that no one is having a bad time at theme parks anymore.
Okay. But just that's kind of fascinating, given that if you think about it, post-pandemic, people did go back to the parks, but these were also, let's be honest, kind of stressed out people, having, been at home, finally returning to the theme park realm. And what are all these people doing in these theme parks? Wow. Okay. Well, I thank you for digging into that. That's fascinating to know that there has been a spike, and will be interesting to see if it continues going forward.
But I'll get to work, Jim. I'll get to work and get that taken care of off the search engines. We'll find somebody else for you.
Thank you. Now, okay, so we were looking forward, and in a moment, we'll take another look back. We're going to continue, but I promise this is the final look at the J-Bangs, at the Universal Hollywood. But before we do that, there's this.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to the Epic Universal Podcast. I do have some exciting news for you. Lauren from the I Want That Too podcast and I just launched a brand new podcast on the Jim Hill Media Network called Diz and Hers. This is the podcast where we deep dive into what the Disney community is talking about. Think of it as the Reddit comments in podcast form. Well, we just launched our first episode, so head over to your favorite podcast platform and search Diz and Hers, and feel free to subscribe and listen to our latest episode.
This episode is brought to you by FX's The Beauty Official Podcast. Join host Evan Ross Katz on the official podcast for FX's hottest new series, The Beauty, taking you behind the scenes with its amazing stars as they discuss the show's most jaw-dropping moments. Featuring Evan Peters, Anthony Ramos, Jeremy Pope, Ashton Kutcher, Rebecca Hall, Bella Hadid, Meghan Trainor, Isabella Rossellini, Jessica Alexander, and Ari Grainer. Search FX's The Beauty wherever you listen to podcasts.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best-fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
They always tell you there's a catch, a compromise, an asterisk. Terms apply. See store for details. Maybe less than advertised. May vary by mood. Probably. Sprite Zero Sugar? It's different. It's the lemon lime flavored refreshment you want with zero sugar. So, no fast voice? No caveats. Just refreshment. This is Sprite Zero Sugar. Obey your thirst.
And we're back. Okay, so obviously the last couple of Epic Universal podcasts, Eric and I have been talking about J-Bangs, those scenes that, Jay Stein added along the tram route to give visitors to the Universal City Studios something to look at as they rolled around the lower lot, especially on like the weekends when fewer things were shooting at Universal Studios. And on previous episodes of this podcast, we talked about the flash flood in the Mexican Village. We talked about the Tarzan scene, the severed arm, the burning house, the runaway train. What we have not talked about yet is how Universal Studios, back in the late 1960s, early 1970s, the formative years of this Southern California tourist attraction, actually described these things. And now, thanks to the generosity of the Ralph family, and I want to be specific here, Mike Ralph, who was nice enough to share his dad Bill's absolutely amazing collection of theme park memorabilia from this period. I got a box in the mail, last week, Eric, that might as well as had the return address Fort Knox, because we'll be working out of this pile of stuff for months, if not years to come. They're just amazing, just this huge pile of brochures for Universal and press clippings for Knott's and stuff going back decades for Disney. So, but anyway, what I got out of this was the specific language that Universal City Studios used to use back then to describe these aspects of the tram tour, which, by the way, again, want to be clear here, weren't called J-Bangs. That was the in-house name. That was never shared with the ticket-buying general public. What they were called were special effects, as in how are movie illusions made. Like this is how this specific moment from the early tram tour, the torpedo attack, the parting of the Red Sea. This is how it was described in promotional material for the park, Eric. It's like, only the Universal Tour gives you a chance to experience the thrilling special effects that have made Hollywood famous. And I also have to say, Eric, me personally, I love how colorful and totally cheesy the individual descriptions of all these J-Bangs are in these early brochures of the tram tour. Like, take, for example, the collapsing bridge. Now, you were just saying in preparation for this week's show, you spent some time on YouTube and watched a lot of videos of the early tram tours. So you must have seen the tram tour, the collapsed bridge in action.
Oh, yeah, I saw it a couple times. And I was watching, I started as early as I could find, and I found some, early 70s clips. I did see good old Carrot Teeth Jaws in some, and then I saw an updated version. But yeah, the collapsing bridge, it seemed like it was almost, there was one bridge on one side and then another bridge. So it was almost like a faux bridge that you didn't really know which one was going to collapse at some point in time. Like, do you recall that? I was confused on that. I'm like, oh, that's a good effect.
Well, here's the setup, folks. And by the way, this came online in 1974 at the park. So you're on the tram tour and you roll up to the bridge. And first you're below the bridge. In fact, there's like a little swamp that the bridge goes across. And so you're down at the ground level on the far edge of the swamp. And, and the driver is telling you, it's like, well, we have some very old things here at Universal Studios. In fact, well, remember, we've been around since 1915. And we have, for example, this bridge. And as he's talking, you literally watch a support from the bridge peel off and then splash down in the water. And it's like, oh, well, and the driver's like, well, that's unfortunate because we have to go across that thing. And so you then drive up the hill, you go across the bridge, and you hear it creaking, you hear it moaning, you hear ominous noises, and then suddenly it seems to drop. And first you scream, and then you laugh because you've been faked out at this point. And then the tram rolls down to where you just were, again, across the swamp, looking back at the bridge, and you now watch, for example, the support rise up out of the water and reconnect to the bridge, and it resets itself after, as Eric just described, it looks like now it broke into two bridges. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, it's a mechanical illusion. And that's what was, and that was the whole point, that that you're on the tram tour. We're gonna fake you out again and again and again, but we're gonna show you how we fake you out. So in the studio tour guide, this moment is described as a bridge collapses under you. One of the tour's most popular effects. Hope you make it across. Now, interesting thing. Collapsing Bridge was part of the Universal Tram Tour from 1974 to 2008. So 34 years in total. Though from day one, because thanks to judicious use of paint and materials that were artificially aged to look far older than they actually were, this thing, the first day it came online looked in imminent danger of collapse. Now, another J-Bang that was added to the tour in 1974. This, on the other hand, was relatively short-lived. It only was presented in the park through the summer of 1978. And was known as the Rock Slide. But again, I was checking with Eric before we got started here today, and you confirmed you actually saw this in action, right?
Yeah, Jim. Yeah, and it wasn't a recent video at Hollywood Studios at Indiana Jones. This was a lot of little balls falling down the hill and looking like it was about to hit people. And I called it the meatballs. It looked like they were literally meatballs falling down a hill.
And I love that it's the perfect description for this, folks. But to sort of set it up, in fact, it used to be one of the very first things you saw when you took the tram tour. You got into the load area and they started down the hill, and you came around a corner, and here was this bare hillside. And as you're making the turn, you hear the sound of, that's a rumble. That's an earthquake. What's going on? And then suddenly rolling down, as Eric, just described, a thundering herd of meatball-like things come, bouncing down the hillside. And it's only as they reach the edge of the hill and they start bouncing off of the side of your tram, you realize those are styrofoam rocks.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's hundreds of styrofoam rocks. And what was actually kind of ingenious about this is that, again, Universal Creative had painted a bunch of styrofoam rocks and then set up this mechanism where you didn't see necessarily between the tram that's on the road and the hillside that the meatballs are rolling down. But there's a ditch in between these. And in the ditch is a moving conveyor belt. Mm-hmm. So the idea is the styrofoam rocks roll down the hill, bounce off the tram, land in the conveyor belt. They're then ferried back up to the top of the hill. In fact, it all happens inside of 90 seconds because they need to be reset for the next tram, which is coming along in 4 minutes. So, it's not the most convincing avalanche you've ever seen in your life again. How many of us are threatened by, oh my God, meatballs?
Old Smoky, on top of Old Smoky, coming down. Yeah.
There we go.
It's interesting to watch on TV. I think it would be cool to see, but yeah, it didn't necessarily seem realistic, but it was a cool little feature.
Well, all right. Now, having spoken with long-time Universal Hollywood employees, they were like, yeah, it was a great effect. 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. On the other hand, if you took the first tram tour of the day, and if it had rained the night before, or if it had been an especially dewy morning, suddenly those meatballs are moving with purpose and speed, and because they're wet, and they have more weight to them. And every so often, during that time of the morning, a meatball would come off of the hillside straight into the tram, not bounce off, and would hit somebody straight in the face. And it was like, and a big wet piece of styrofoam could still do some damage. So that was one of the reasons why it only lasted 4 years. After, and you got to remember, this is also the 70s, where, there wasn't a Morgan and Morgan. You get off the tram and it's like, I get hit in the face by a wet, styrofoam rock, and like, well, can we get you soda? Or a towel? Our idea of recompense at that point, was different. But anyway, if we go back to the brochure, how this is described in the mid-'70s is like duck. It's a rumbling, tumbling rockside, Hollywood's version of an avalanche. Now, just a year after the collapsing bridge and the rock slide were added to the Universal Tram Tour, what for many years served as the Tram Tour's grand finale was added in 1975, and this was, Eric, I'm not kidding you, this is the actual name of this moment on the Tram Tour, the Doomed Glacier Expedition.
Oh, and I have questions about this, Jim, because I saw this multiple times, and I'm like, what am I looking at here? So I'm continue on. I have questions, but you might answer those.
Okay, well, here we go. Now, for a time, the folks at Universal Hollywood like to pretend that this attraction on the Tram Tour was actually tied to the Iger Sanction, a Clint Eastwood movie that Universal had sent out into theaters in May of 1975, and movies ostensibly about mountain climbing, but there is a tunnel in the movie. All right, so Universal grabs onto this tunnel in the Iger Sanction, and they use it as an excuse to visit a classic amusement park attraction called the Madhouse. Now, the gimmick of the Madhouse is that you walk into, what you think is a living room, and you take a seat in something that looks like, a glider that somebody has on their front porch. And then as you're sitting there in the glider in the middle of this living room, you start to get disoriented because, well, you're remaining stationary in this glider, but the room itself begins to revolve around you, right? And which your brain now interprets as like, well, I must be spinning rather than the room is spinning. So if what you saw and by the way, Universal takes this idea, and what they do is they move this illusion to the next level, because what they do is they have the glamour tram first drive into a long, thin tube. And by the way, this whole time, your glamour tram is sitting on an elevated set of tracks that's running through the center of this tube. And the walls in this cavern surrounding you have been painted and decorated to look like they're made out of snow and ice. And then once your tram got fully into the tube and parked, locked its brakes, the walls of the cavern itself would begin to spin. And again, this is how it was described in the tour guide. You're caught in a whirling alpine avalanche and then find yourself plummeting into an icy chasm. So did you get that at all from looking at the video of the tram tour? Or?
Oh, Jim, it did remind me of, like a carnival, show, like you said, the mat. So I walked, and I wasn't sure. I mean, I could tell it was somewhat of an avalanche of snow. It definitely made me disoriented, and I'm just watching it on a TV, right? Yep. I could only imagine how I'd feel if I was in that, and I'm wondering if they gave people little bags, because I'm like, I don't know, this motion sickness kind of deal. It really did mess with your brain.
It did. And what was interesting is that the easiest way to shut the whole effect down was closing your eyes. Because, it's your brain telling you, that you're being fed visual information that you're spinning, but on the other hand, you close your eyes and you shut down that info. It's like, I'm not moving. And mind you, you're hearing also an audio soundtrack of, rolling and rumbling and that sort of thing to reinforce that. And by the way, over the 28 years that this J-Bang existed, Universal Creative rethemed it twice. From 1997 to 2000, it paid tribute to Dante's Peak, That was that Pierce Brosnan movie about, a Mount St. Helens-like eruption of a volcano in modern-day Washington State. And then from 2001 through 2013, it actually celebrated Stephen Sommers' Mummies movies. And, it supposedly it was, the mummy that was making the tunnel turn.
Now they painted it too. It wasn't white and blue anymore because
No. Yep, that's it exactly.
I was thinking to myself, I'm like, why do I think of it also? I'm like, I think I saw it twice. I'm like, I saw early versions, and then it was more of like a sand. A rock
there we go.
color. Okay, that makes tons of sense now.
When it was Dante's Peak, they painted it lava colored.
There you go.
Anyway, this ice tunnel, lava tunnel, mummy tunnel closes in 2013 to make way for Fast and Furious Supercharged, which was the grand finale of the Tram tour, starting in 2015, installed as part of the 50th anniversary celebration of the launch of the Universal Tram Tour, only to have been shut down in March of last year, 2025, supposedly with the notion that Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift would be opening at that theme park this summer, and that would also open up a big chunk of real estate, which, depending on who you talk to, could be where Hollywood's Diagon Alley eventually gets built. But hey, you didn't hear that from me. Anyway, Doom Glacier Expedition is important to Universal Hollywood, even with its tentative tie to the Iger sanction, because that kicks off a whole new era for the history of the tour, where Universal begins to tie it to contemporary films, which, given that Universal Pictures had one of the biggest hits ever the very same year this Clint Eastwood film came out, 1975. That's significant. And we will get to the film I'm talking about in a sec. But first, this.
Whether your business has 6 floors or 6 employees, Walmart Business has everything you need to save time, money, and hassle. You can restock your break room with bulk ordering or bulk up your ordering team with shared payments. And you can get it all delivered straight to your business's door, whether that's on Wall Street or Main Street. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
And we're back. Okay, so again, Universal City Studios starts its Tram tour in 1964, and it takes a full decade before the theme park in Hollywood begins celebrating contemporary films. Now, TV shows, different story. Do you remember Adam 12 at all? The police procedural from the 70s?
Jim, I knew you were going to ask me this, and no, I don't. I've heard of it, I think. I think I've heard of Adam 12.
No, you're allowed to, not to have watched this show. I mean, I'm old. I remember this. A half-hour-long police procedural was on NBC on Saturday nights, started back in 1968, was actually created by Jack Webb and produced at Universal Television. They had Martin Milner and Kent McCord as L.A. police officers Pete Malloy and Jim Reed, and hugely popular. Eric, so much so that Universal set up on the upper lot as part of its visitor entertainment center an Adam 12 show, where inside of Stage 70, they'd recruit guests out of the audience to come be extras in this faux episode of the TV show that was being shot there in the park that day. But what was killer about this, and again, you can go on YouTube and watch this now, is that at the end of the show, if you had participated, the Universal reps caught you backstage and said, "Oh, by the way, we shot this," and if you want a souvenir, fill out this form and give us $5. We'll mail you an 8mm home movie of this whole thing, and you will be cut into this episode like was an Adam 12 episode.
Wow.
And so, and again, it was this brand new revenue stream for the park. And by the way, this was film, folks, not video, because again, this only gets up and running, I want to say, in 1970. But anyway, Adam 12 goes off the air in May of 1975. But on the other hand, this attraction, the Stage 70 on the upper lot, is so popular with visitors to Universal City Studios that, well, the people who run the park immediately go to Jack Webb and say, can we build another theme park show around what are the things you're producing? He's like, oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. How about Emergency? And this was now an hour-long drama built around a firehouse in L.A., debuted January 72, also hugely popular. So they do the same thing. They just take the sets and now redo it as, oh, there's a fire. And, and here comes the team from Emergency to rescue all of the people. But they still need victims of the accident or people who are trapped in the burning building. And it's the same thing. They shoot it. And as you finish performing and you're walking off stage, they catch you and get your $5 and you fill out the clipboard, and a couple of weeks later the whole movie shows up and there's Dad pinned under a car at Universal. Now what I find fascinating about this is that Jack Webb, I mean, yes, he's shooting these things on the Universal backlot. So it makes sense, he's working with the Universal Television and that they'd be part of the Universal theme parks. But for me, what's fascinating about this is Jack Webb very early on worked at Disney. In fact, he shot the original Dragnet TV series, the version that ran from 1951 to 1959, on the Burbank lot in Soundstage 2, which, by the way, is the very same soundstage that Mary Poppins and the Princess Bride, the Princess Diaries was shot on. In fact, that's one of the reasons why in 2001, Soundstage 2 on the Disney lot was renamed the Julie Andrews stage, just in honor of, all the work she'd done for the company in this space. But Webb had this really interesting tie to Soundstage 2, Eric, in that Walt had started construction of this, and it was still is the largest soundstage on the Disney lot in Burbank. Started in 47 and then ran out of money.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was an interesting time at the Disney company. I mean, mind you, just over the horizon, February of 1950 is Cinderella, and Disney never had money problems again. But there was this window of time where Walt had a cash flow issue, and Jack Webb heard about it and said, I tell you what, I can float you a loan. We can get this thing built. And Walt was so grateful because he did it quietly, he did it discreetly, and they got the thing completed in 49. That when Webb started shooting Dragnet, Walt reached out and said, "Hey, you can shoot it here for cost." It's just sort of like I'm not, you help me, I'll help you. So, and now mind you, Jack Webb revives Dragnet in 1967, and he goes to Disney, and they're like, "Yeah, that's nice. Walt's dead."
Just say a year too late, buddy.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So anyway, back to 1975, and look, you've listened to this podcast before. The movie that came out that year was Jaws. And to many folks consider that to be the first true summer blockbuster. And so Universal, has this monstrous hit on its hands. So it turns to Spielberg and says, give us stuff. We can put it on the upper lot. People will be really excited to see stuff from Jaws. And so they're all right. We'll get you one of the mechanical sharks, and that was up there on the upper lot for that summer, and this was one of those 25-foot long, one of three, by the way, that Bob Matty had built for Spielberg for his movie. Matty, of course, is the same guy who did the Mechanical Squid for 20,000 Leagues for Disney. He did the original Animals for the Jungle Cruise at Disneyland. And so this is why Jay Stein, turned to him and said, "Oh, cool. And after that summer, we're going to take the Mechanical Shark and we're going to take it to the lower lot and we're going to make it one of my J bangs." And Spielberg's like, "Were you paying attention at all last year? We ran 100 days over schedule because none of these sharks worked. What makes you think that you're going to haul this thing down to the lower lot and it's suddenly going to be like your Mexican village flash flood, that it's going to be able to reset in 4 minutes for the next tram?" I mean, we sat around off of the shore of Martha's Vineyard for days at a time trying to get these things to work.
He slept through those meetings, Jim. Jay was not paying attention. Yeah.
Not paying attention. So they had to build a brand new 25-foot long mechanical shark that would do what it had to. Move along a wharf, come out of the water repeatedly, snap at a tram load of tourists, and then, after the tram leaves, immediately go back into position, reset for the next tram load of tourists. And they were able to actually use some stuff from the Really For Real film. There in what they did on the lower lot. In fact, in the Studio C, that's what they called the body of water. That's what they called it before Murder, She Wrote. Started being shot on the Universal lot. Suddenly then it became Cabot Cove. But what was cool is that set of as the pre-show before the shark began attacking the tram, as you look out in the water and you see this giant, oversized shark fin cut through the water. And by the way, that was the actual fin that was used off the shore of Martha's Vineyard for the shots when they, only needed to see that part of the shark. By the way, you can see that same fin today at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Museum. In fact, now through July 26th of this year, thanks to Jaws, the exhibition. And Eric, I don't know how this got by us.
Oh, Jim, it didn't get by me. I chose not to share it because of my fear for Jaws, and you would have to talk about it. A friend of the show, Ashley, sent a ton, and it's really cool looking. For a guy that's terrified of sharks, I was looking at all the artifacts and so forth. But yeah, it's super cool. Did you get to see all the pictures and everything?
I only found about it like literally yesterday, and I'm kicking myself. It launched back on September 14th of last year. It's this 11,000 square foot. In fact, it's being presented in the Marilyn and Jeffrey Katzenberg wing of the museum. Over 200 artifacts. And I got to say, I just, in reading up on this, I mean, well, you and I are going out to L.A.
Yeah.
In fact, I was already telling Alice that, we're going. We're definitely going to the museum. I have to check this out. If only because, again, there are stories here I have never heard before. I mean, for example, we talked on a previous edition of the Epic Universal podcast about the story that Quint shares on the Pequod one night about the Indianapolis tragedy, and what I only learned about just this week was that was a new story in 1975 because it had only just been declassified by the Pentagon. It had been literally a military secret for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Because the feeling was that if the American public learned about how the men who delivered the bomb for Hiroshima had died, it would have been so demoralizing. It would have, hurt the country during a pretty, tender time when we were recovering from the war and all of the men that we lost. And the notion that these poor guys were in the water for 4 days before anybody came looking for them. No, I never knew that story, and I only learned that because of Jaws the exhibit, which I will be checking out when we go to LA in March.
I'm not sure I'll be joining you, Jim. No, I'm conquering one fear at a time. I was watching the Tram, and I had to figure out which side of the boat I should sit on because I'm thinking, all right, although I know it's a shark and it's not the greatest, depiction of a shark, there's still some like terror in me to see that come up close. I'm like, if I sit on the left and have my kids over on the right, they'll be face first with it. So it's like I'm slowly conquering a little bit by little bit. Like I can deal with the clips on X now. I'm almost to the point where I can watch the Jaws movie. So like I'm slowly. So I don't know if you could throw me in an exhibit with just nothing but Jaws pictures and me not get traumatized as a child. But they do have all types of cool stuff. I can see it from a distance. And there is a really cool part of the exhibit where you can do that iconic shot, that pan zoom where they do it for you on your phone and you email it to you. So it's like an old trick. They probably make you give them $5 and they send it to you in an 8mm. Right.
There we go. All right. Well, on that note, folks, I think for now we button up the history of J-Bangs at the Universal City Studios, the Tram tour out in Hollywood. And also, I think that'll do it for this week. By the way, though, if you do have topics or suggestions, things that you'd like Eric and I to cover on future editions of this podcast, feel free to reach out, send those along via social media. And again, thanks so much again to Mike Rowell for sharing these treasures from his dad. Anyway, beyond that, thanks again for listening, folks, and we will be back next week.